Welcome to City Inside Out, your source of information about what's happening in Seattle politics. Among other headlines of late, the city has a new housing director. How much will she be able to control this crazy housing market? We'll ask Katie Hong about her new job. And later, two low-income housing developers discuss the role they play and whether the city is doing enough to help them. Before that, however, the news. Get even was the theme coming out of this week's annual City Council retreat. Peter Steinbrook says the new year demands a new approach between the council and the mayor. Greg Nichols has been a surprisingly strong force to contend with, and council members all but conceded that he got the better of them during his first year in office. Suggestions for this new relationship include delaying or even blocking the mayor's legislative proposals if he refuses to cooperate with lawmakers. Also being considered is hiring more council staffers to analyze and write legislation of its own. This story, I can assure you, will be a fun one for us all to watch this year. The council this week unanimously agreed to establish a new citizen advisory board to oversee city light. The move was recommended by several recent audits of the utility, which found the organization lacking outside checks and balances. Further oversight of both City Light and Seattle's other major utility, the Water Department, was also approved this week. The council now requires that its own members sit on at least one of its two standing utilities committees. Some on the council had not been a member of either. The recent audits criticized lawmakers for not being adequately informed about utility issues. The city is about to have a new housing office director. This week, a council committee unanimously approved Katie Hong to the post. Her nomination has been criticized by some, citing a relative lack of housing experience. Prior to joining the Nichols administration last year, Hong had worked as a policy advisor to Governor Gary Locke. Some council members who early on had doubts about Hong's background seemed swayed by the strong support she received during a recent public meeting. The head of the area's low-income housing development group had this to say about Hong's nomination.
Very impressed in our work with her, intelligence and problem-solving approaches. She's very clear and honest about where she agrees with us and disagrees with us. Her contacts at various levels of government are very important, I think, to the city. And she has moved very quickly and intelligently on implementation of the new housing levy.
The monorail continues its aggressive community outreach. At one meeting last week, the group unveiled a possible alternative that stacks the north and southbound trains on top of one another instead of putting them side by side. Meanwhile, the council unveiled some pretty sharp disagreement about how they will review the monorail's ongoing progress. Our cameras caught their debate over which council committee was best suited to deal with monorail issues as they arise. Richard McIver strongly disagreed with a proposal not to have the Transportation Committee do the work. For him, it seems the logical choice.
I also will be voting against this. I'm very concerned because I happen to believe that every street or alley we put down or vacate crosses land use issues. I think it crosses multiple issues. I think that SR 99 has the same issues the monorail has, and it's a transportation project. 520 and I-90 are transportation issues and stay in the Transportation Committee. I think that when you create the monorail and community committee, I don't know what that is.
The monorail really is a question of the monorail going through our communities. I chair neighborhoods, and neighborhoods is community as well. So I think there's a recognition that there's a total integration between the monorail and many different elements in the city.
Turns out that Licata will likely win the day. The council seems poised to refer all monorail oversight and review to his neighborhoods committee. The fight between communities and cell phone companies achieved a ceasefire this week. One large wireless operator, T-Mobile, has agreed to follow new procedures for siting cell antennas on utility poles in Seattle. Many neighborhoods have complained about the visual and potential health impacts of the structures. The company will now notify neighbors living within 300 feet of a proposed antenna and hold a public meeting to solicit feedback. And speaking of wireless, some local groups are looking for used cell phones. They are being distributed to battered women. The old phones are reactivated so that 911 calls can be made. If you have an old cell phone lying around and want to offer it to this program, you can contact www.wirelessfoundation.org and find out where to direct it locally. A birthday of sorts to announce. It was exactly 100 years ago that the Olmsted brothers, the famed park designers from back east, were brought out to Seattle to plan the city's park and boulevard system. There are many events over the year to commemorate the centennial of the Olmsted legacy here in Seattle. The official kickoff is early next week. And while on the topic of green space, the 3 city-owned golf courses in Seattle, Jackson Park, Jefferson Park, and West Seattle, will soon come back under city control. Since 1995, an independent nonprofit has been operating the courses. It was hoped that outside management would be both more efficient and less expensive. Time has proved that theory wrong, however, for the group has run out of money. Thus, control will return to the city. In its defense, the nonprofit argues that it could have operated the courses more economically had the city not required that it use hire Parks Department employees for maintenance instead of private sector workers. And now for our weekly neighborhood roundup, our brief listing of events of note happening around the city. This week, the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle announced that after several years of negotiating, it is indeed ready to purchase the old Coleman School on the I-90 lid. The plan is to transform it into the city's first African-American museum and cultural center. And this news from West Seattle, a business group there has rejected the city's plan to install a high-tech automated toilet near the junction. They said a large public toilet would not be appropriate at the entrance to a commercial area. It will instead be put on Capitol Hill. In all, 5 automated public toilets will be installed in the city later this year. And finally, an obituary of sorts near Ballard. A landmark up in that part of town closed its doors this week. Hiram's restaurant near the locks has now gone dark. New owners will transform the eatery into a space for weddings and corporate functions. And now for our City Inside Out calendar. Here's what we think you might want to know about in the upcoming weeks. Learn how to avoid landslide damage in and around your home. If you are in a threatened area, you're encouraged to attend. The meeting is on February 1st at South Seattle Community College. The Ethics and Election Commission will meet on February 5th. And if you live in Southwest, the District Council down there will also meet on February 5th. The monthly First Thursday Art Walk will be on the 6th in Pioneer Square, and the Northeast District Council will meet up in Wedgwood on the 6th also. For more information about these events, you can check our website at www.seattlechannel.org. And finally today, aggressive dogs. The council may soon consider a proposal to loosen the leash on its strict policy towards potentially dangerous hounds. Right now, dog owners get only 1 warning before being cited. They say the policy amounts to 2 strikes and you're out. Needless to say, many non-dog owners are fighting the change. Proposed new rules relating to this are expected to be presented to the council in February. And on that note, we close. A quick break now to regroup. When we come back, Katie Hong, the mayor's new choice to lead the Office of Housing, joins us, and later 2 low-income housing developers talk about what it's like to work with the city. All that ahead in a moment. We now welcome Katie Hong. She is the acting director of the city's Office of Housing. She's expected to be confirmed by the full council next week, after which her title will be full director, right? Director,
That's right.
no
I'll
acting.
be able to take the acting off of my title.
How did you get this job?
Since beginning of last year, I started working for the mayor as his senior policy advisor on housing, community, and economic development issues. I have come to this position with experience at all levels of government, federal, state, and local, on working in key policy advisor roles on issues of social policy, housing, community, and economic development issues. So again, when I was with the mayor, one of the things that I helped do is advise him on the development and the passage of the housing levy proposal that the voters passed last September. So when the job opened up in middle of September, when Cynthia Parker, who's then director of Office of Housing, told the mayor that she was leaving, the mayor asked me if this was something that I wanted to do.
Typically, with a cabinet level position, this mayor has gone out and done some kind of search, whether it be a national, in some cases a national search, even a regional search. It sounds like it wasn't done in this case. I mean, he comes into your office and says, hey, you're You're my person. Why wasn't there a search done, or was there?
There wasn't a search done. He, I think, asked me to take this position because, again, of the kind of skills and experience that I bring to the table. And I think, what I bring to the table is, again, my commitment to increasing affordable housing opportunities and to always being in professions where I can use my skills and efforts to increase equal opportunity and to create a more just and equitable society. I think he thought that my experience of having worked at all the different levels of government and the network of relationships that I bring to this position would be extremely effective now, especially because the office is so focused on effectively and efficiently implementing the 2002 housing levy. And part of that means that we have to work with our state partners, our federal partners, as well as with this amazing group of both public and private sector partners that we have in the community to maximize every single city dollars to increase affordable housing opportunities.
Some members of the council were concerned early on that you hadn't had direct housing experience, as say you hadn't run a nonprofit or really hadn't ever run a housing agency before. Council members seem to love you now. You got everyone on board at that council committee hearing, and you're expected to get the full council vote. What swayed them? Why is it that they're no longer concerned? And what are you here to say about the fact that you haven't managed a housing operation before?
Well, CR, for the past 3 months, I have been in that position in an acting capacity. And as soon as I started, I had two primary focuses. The first was we've got to start jumping on the effective implementation of the housing levy. So for the past 3 months, I have led my staff in meeting with key stakeholders, key community people, to start doing the levy planning. And one of the products that we're currently spending a lot of time working on is the levy administrative and financial plan, which we're bringing to the council at the end of January for their approval so that we can start spending the levy dollars. The second thing is one of the first things that I did when I started was led our agency into developing a specific strategic work plan for 2003 that clearly identifies all of our agency objectives and goals, what the different action steps are going to be, and who's going to be held accountable for it. I've proactively met with some of the key folks in the housing community to listen to their perspectives and to listen to their concerns about the agency. I'm committed to working with them because that's the only way we're going to be able to not only meet but exceed the production goals that we've set out in the housing levy. So I've been doing the job for the past 3 months, and I think, I come to this position with lots of experience in working with groups of people to get things done in government, and that while I've done that, I've been used to being in positions where I've relied on the technical and the professional expertise of whether they're legal experts or development experts. And in my job as a director of housing, I plan on continuing to do that. I lead a staff, if I could just add, I lead a staff of 43 excellent, committed, dedicated staff, and I am really looking forward to continuing to do a good job.
Well, and you clearly swayed those who might have even had concerns early on. What is the biggest challenge this year for the housing office?
The biggest challenge, I would say, is the declining, is the budget situation. As an agency, that affects us in two ways. The first is in terms of our operating resources. Unfortunately, the Office of Housing faced significant budget reductions in the budget last year. We lost about a quarter of our staff. Given the economic realities, that situation isn't likely to get better. So like many public agencies, we are having to do more with less. And that's just a reality and something that I'm committed to absolutely doing. At the same time, because of all of the other budget cuts in areas like human and health services, as people get deinstitutionalized from the state in terms of prisons, in terms of mental institutions, that means that more and more people might end up on the streets, which then leads to more increased demand for affordable housing. It also puts an increased demand on the social services side. One of the things that we do in the Office of Housing is we fund housing projects that serve some of our most vulnerable populations,
I mean,
homeless
that's the
populations.
biggest issue you guys deal with, is sort of doling out money to help those populations. Build low-income housing, build service centers, that kind of stuff.
Well, we actually do a continuum along the housing. I mean, we serve all low-income renters and homeowners. So yes, it's true. Most of our, I would say, more than half of our rental production dollars go to serving households at less than 30% of median income. So these are, people with who are homeless, who
The toughest populations.
That's right. But there is also homeowners. What we also spend time trying to get low-income renters into home ownership, because we think that has it serves community development goals, and it also helps people build up equity in order to reach the American dream. Like
Is
all
that
of
the
us.
only solution? That is to say, adding more money to create quote-unquote protected units. I mean, is there anything else your office can do in the way of somehow keeping prices down? Policies, rent control, parking requirement reduction. I mean, what else can you do short of just direct subsidies to units that helps ease this housing crunch?
Well, we actually do more than that. I mean, that's a very good question. We are the city's largest investor in the production and rehabilitation and preservation of affordable housing. But as the city's Office of Housing, whose core mission is to increase affordable housing opportunities, we look at all ways that the city can affect affordable housing. So we do look at kind of
private market.
That's right. So we look at development incentives that would like the housing bonus and transfer of development rights are two programs that we've currently administer in our office to try to get private developers to come in and support affordable housing development. We are also working with other sister agencies like DCLU and OE in the Office of Economic Development to try to identify, are there ways to streamline permitting? Are there ways to make our land use code simpler and easier so that we can bring down the construction of affordable housing?
Construction costs.
That's right. Yeah. And I have to say that I think, when I think about the mission of our office, we do more than provide basic shelter to people. I mean, that's a very important goal, and it's something that we absolutely do. But we also help to create vibrant, strong communities. I mean, let me give you a couple of examples. I mean, one of the projects that we've done that we've helped fund in Seattle's International District is the ID Village Square project. I mean, it combines assisted living facilities with a daycare center with
the restaurant, because I was there last night eating. Actually.
So anyway, but there are lots of, we support building strong communities. And the other thing we do, especially when we serve vulnerable populations, is not only do we get them into housing, but we also help combine it with important social services so that we get them off the streets, stabilized into housing, get them social services that may allow them to go on their path to independence and self-sufficiency.
Katie Hong, thanks so much for being here.
Great, thank you.
Soon to be the full permanent director of the Office of Housing, if everything goes as you want it next week with the council.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your coming in. And next, stay with us. Two low-income housing developers join us when our program continues in a moment. We're now joined by Chuck Weinstock. He is the director of CHIP, the Capitol Hill Housing Improvement Program. Also here, Ginger Siegel. She is with the Low Income Housing Institute. Welcome to you both. Chuck, let me ask you just sort of briefly lay out the land of what are you nonprofits and what do you do?
Nonprofits are independent from the city and from the private sector and play the role in Seattle of producing, owning, and managing most of the affordable housing in the city that is financed by local, state, and federal sources.
I mean, it's right to say the city is not an owner and manager of any units.
That's correct.
When we think about low-income housing and affordable housing, it's really all independently produced.
The city is really a public funder and a regulator.
How does the Seattle Housing Authority fit into this? Because that seems like a public agency to most people.
Right. I think it would probably be fair to think about there being two major sectors in addition to the private sector. One is the Seattle Housing Authority, an entity that owns and manages what we know as public housing and the Section 8 program, and then the nonprofit sector, which is a collection of neighborhood-based and other nonprofits whom also produce and manage affordable housing.
And the big ones, the SHA, are like the Rainier Vista and the Holly Park, and those are big projects we think of.
Yes.
Ginger, Low Income Housing Institute owns and manages about 1,200 units. Most of
that's
those
correct.
is in the city of Seattle. What are would you know it driving by?
No, you wouldn't know it driving by. We try to blend our projects into the communities, and we feel that we do a very good job of that. We get a lot of compliments from neighbors and other community groups on the quality, the physical quality of the housing, and the housing is managed well also.
What are some of your units? The names?
Sure. We own quite a few buildings in the city of Seattle. We have a number of family projects, Denise Hunt Townhomes in North Seattle in the Greenwood area. And right now we are renting up the Meadowbrook apartments, which are on 110th and Lake City Way. And that is 51 units of housing for families. It includes 15 units for homeless families, so it has a range of different folks living there, from homeless families to working poor.
Chuck, what are some of your projects that people might know as they've walked by?
Sure. I think one would be the Villa Apartments at the corner of Pike and Boren, which notably was the previous site of the Apple Theater, but now is a new mixed-use building. The other would be new infill at the corner of 15th and Harrison, which was previously a one-story bank and now is a mixed-use building with 19 units of affordable housing, including 2- and 3-bedroom units, which are particularly rare in Capitol Hill.
And typically, these units are protected. That is to say, someone income qualifies if they want to be there. They got to write out their, their history and their how much they make, etc. And assuming they income qualify, that's to say they're not overly earning, they can go into one of your buildings and they got subsidized rent in effect. You just charge them less is how it works. Somehow you're able to create projects that just rent for under market.
That's correct. I mean, the key role that the city and other public funds play is writing down the cost of the project so that we can charge rents that low-income households can afford and still pay the operating costs for the properties.
So there's no ongoing subsidy typically.
Well, that can vary. I mean, some of the buildings also have rent subsidies, especially ones that are intended to serve extremely low-income people.
Ginger?
Right. We do a lot of housing for people whose incomes are so low that they can't even pay enough money to pay the ongoing operating costs. So we need operating subsidies in order to run that type of housing. And those subsidies mostly come from the federal government through the Section 8 program, although there is a little bit of money as part of the housing levy that helps to support extremely low-income households as well on an ongoing basis.
Seattle has a pretty good history of housing levies. The first one of 4 was approved in 1980, and we've done 3 since. So for a total of several $100 million, over a couple $100 million, I think, in public money spent for affordable housing. Has any other city that you know of in the U.S. done it quite this way and this effectively?
Seattle's record is unparalleled. I don't think there's any other city in the country that has consciously voted to tax itself expressly for the purpose of providing low-income housing. Lots of cities spend money they get from other parts of government to do that, but not very many others do what Seattle has done. Recently, California passed a gigantic bond issue for affordable housing, but on a municipal basis, I don't think Seattle has a peer.
I mean, we ought to be pretty happy, yes or no, Ginger Siegel, in how we're doing.
The residents of Seattle have been tremendously generous. We're very fortunate to have the housing levy here, and we would not be able to produce and provide as much affordable housing without it.
What are the problems with a group like Low Income Housing Institute trying to deal with the city, or the things as you look at the city and its policy towards housing, are the things you change, things they can do better?
Well, like I said, the residents of Seattle have been very generous, and the city has been very much a leader in forging policies for affordable housing. There are some areas, though, that we would like to see improvement. most notably anti-displacement. We would like to see the city take a more active role in anti-displacement policies where they try to preserve the existing housing stock as much as possible.
And how so? What can they do? I mean, anti-displacement means more actively engaged in not having buildings torn down?
Not having buildings torn down, having private owners keep their buildings open, and then also facilitating transfers of existing buildings that are occupied to nonprofits or others that are committed to keeping the rents low on those buildings.
How do you do that? The Lillian Apartments, which is down South Lake Union, Paul Allen owns it, did own it, now owns the site because there's nothing on it. He tore it down. There was a lot of protest about, and I don't know if you folks were involved in it,
Somewhat, yeah.
but you probably supported those who were, to keep that as an affordable housing, a low-income unit. Was there anything more the city could do to stop that? I mean, if a private owner wants to take it down, what should stop them?
Well, the city could pass new laws to encourage owners to keep their buildings open. But in the particular case of the Lillian, there was a law on the books that said you couldn't tear the building down if it was still habitable, and the owner made it uninhabitable. The owner went into the building and took out banisters and other things that were life safety components of the building so that they would be allowed to tear it down. And we would have liked to have seen the city play a more active role in requiring the owner to keep it habitable and not allowing them to, sort of dismantle the building themselves in order to be able to tear it down.
Chuck Weinstock, is the fact that we've created this nonprofit community of folks, and you're all doing great work, and I think it's hard for anyone to criticize that. But is it a kind of a concession, this whole creation of nonprofits, that the private market can't do it, and that we've given up hope in trying to get any private developer without public subsidies, without public money to produce affordable housing?
I guess I don't know if it's a matter of giving up hope. I mean, I think one of the things that is Seattle's experience is when you have a strong market, when you have high prices, owners have options to get any owner to produce or charge less than what the market will bear involves some form of government intervention, financial or regulatory. So actually all the programs that the city operates are open to private entities. By and large, the rules and the commitments they have to make would make it unattractive to a non-mission driven organization. So I think it's not so much a giving up hope as much as our reality that it is, if you want rents that are less than the market, in Seattle we have to buy those.
Has the market eased up in the last year or two, and is that a good thing?
Well, the market has eased up, and so vacancy rates have increased, and rents in some neighborhoods have gone down or stabilized. So that's that is helpful for some people, but incomes are going down. Median income went down quite a bit. So like the economy is dampening the rental market, it's also decreasing people's incomes and decreasing their opportunities. Just
about a minute left, and I want you both to react to the question about whether do you feel like you're ever getting ahead of the problem? I mean, is affordable housing something that is just, there's never enough of it? Doesn't matter how many units you guys produce?
I guess I don't at the moment think that there's some date out there that we're going to be able to claim victory here. We're going to have some degree, it's when the economy's good, people have a hard time affording rent. When the economy's bad, working and low-income people have a hard time affording the rent.
Yeah. Ginger Eagle, 10 seconds on that question.
The homelessness is growing, and it's growing when the economy is good, it's growing when the economy is bad. What we're doing is good. It's good to be producing a lot of affordable housing, but it's not getting ahead of the problem.
It's Ginger Siegel.
Yes.
From the Low-Income Housing Institute, Chuck Weinstock with the Capitol Hill Housing Improvement Program. Thank you both for coming in.
You're welcome.
And we thank you all for watching. Join us next week for another edition of City Inside Out. Until then, on behalf of our talented studio crew here at the program, I'm C.R. Douglas. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.